Hello and welcome to my beginner's guide for Heaven Burns Red Season 1. In this video I will go over the basics of forming elemental teams, damage multipliers, and how you could apply these into your strategy to take on score challenge battles. This will mostly be a general guide and I'll go over meta strategies that require specific memoria. So if you're fairly new to the game, you should be able to follow along just fine. Aside from having a weakness or a resistance against the main 3 weapon types, some enemies also can have specific elemental weaknesses. The main elemental types are Thunder, Ice, Fire, Light, and Dark. Anything else is considered non-elemental. If an attack skill has an elemental type to it, it will be indicated by an icon next to the weapon type. Elemental attack skills are mostly exclusive to SS Memoria, with some small exceptions, such as this Azruka, which you can get for free by playing the Summer event, which you unlock after Chapter 2. But there's a Fire Elemental skill attack, which you can use on multiple enemies at the same time. Building a specific elemental team mostly depends on what memoria you have, but you mainly just want a character that can hit the enemy's weakness as your main damage dealer. And in all cases you also want to avoid attacking with attacks the enemy has resistance to. There are also some memoria that can buff certain elemental attacks or debuff an enemy's elemental weaknesses. If you have some of these, it's highly recommended you also put them in your team. Alright, here's an example of a team I have that focuses on Thunder. I have Ichigo as my main damage dealer here. Her ultimate move is a Thunder Piercing attack, which does massive damage against the enemy's HP. I also have Yuina here as a second damage dealer. You could also replace her with another debuffer or a buffer if you would like so. What you do really depends on what you have and what you want to do. I also have Kozue here as a debuffer. She's equipped with the skill Grave Mist, which lowers the thunder defense of an enemy, and also an attack that puts the fragile debuff on an enemy, which I will explain in a bit. Over here I have Tama as a healer, which you would likely need in most cases. And I use these two as general buffers. If you want to focus on another elemental type, you swap the memoria, go to filter, and search for the specific type you want. For example, I want to focus on Ice, and I can replace Ichigo with Yamawaki as the main damage dealer. And for example, I could replace Yuno with Sumomo as a secondary, or I could put another debuffer here. What you do here really doesn't matter that much, as long as you have one main damage dealer that hits the enemy's weaknesses. Next we will talk about damage multipliers. As mentioned before, enemies can have specific weaknesses, both weapon type and elemental. If you manage to hit with both of the weaknesses, the damage would be massive, as they are multiplied by each other. But at the same time, you want to avoid hitting an enemy's resistance at all costs, even if you hit them with the weakness as well, because they don't really cancel each other out. By far the best way to increase your damage output is by using buffs and debuffs. There are many buffs and debuffs in the game, which all have different effects on damage calculation. I will quickly go over some of the most common ones you should probably know. For buffs, we have Skill Enhance, which also can have an elemental version, Charge, which increases your crit rate and your attack power, and Multi-Hit, which increases the amount of hits you give to an enemy. On debuffs, we have Defense Down, and also a separate elemental defense down, and Fragile, which increases the damage to an enemy's weakness. There are a few more, but they are a lot less common. The amount of increase or decrease can vary based on the skill, so it's impossible to give an exact number. Most debuffs only last for one turn, but this can be extended by using Overdrive. A lot of the buffs and debuffs can be stacked on top of each other, even some with the same types. For example, give one of your characters 2 skill enhances, however any additional beyond 2 will be saved for the next turn. Some buffs only get used when an attack skill is used, so they won't be used up if you use a regular attack or keep the buffed character in the back line. There are many other things that go into damage calculation, mainly in character stats. Higher level characters are of course more powerful. You can also increase these stats by using boosters and accessories, or simply leveling up your character. There's also a small chance you can hit a critical hit, which will also greatly increase your damage. And of course there's the fact that breakers have attack skills that do more damage against DP, and attackers have skills that do more damage against HP after a shoot break. And also, there is the devastation rate. There's a percentage on top of the health bar. This is the percentage of damage you do after breaking an enemy. This percentage goes up with every attack you do. Using a blaster's unique skill with high devastation rate will greatly increase this percentage. And lastly, you can get a 10% damage increase when you activate Overdrive. So this would be the ideal time to unleash your most powerful attack. Next up, I want to talk about how I take on score challenge battles. Here you can set your difficulty. The higher the difficulty, the higher score you get, but the enemy becomes more powerful. Down here it shows the recommended squad rating. If your squad rating is far below this number, you're going to have a really hard time taking it on, which may also cause you to lose bonus points at the end of the battle, so it's not recommended to go too far. This score challenge battle boss has a weakness to Thunder and Ice. I will mainly be using Ichigo and Yuina as my attackers. You always want to be using at least one main damage dealer. Score challenge battle bosses usually have a lot more HP than DP, so it's best to go with an attacker type. If you can rack up enough power, it won't really matter that much. You also always want to have at least one healer, and maybe in some cases even 2. Since stacking buffs is so powerful, Highly recommend to have multiple characters and give out different types of buffs. So I'll be using 2 in this case. And lastly, I'll be using a debuffer here. Make sure you're using the right skills and that you're also using the right equipment. You can easily just press auto equip to let the game choose the most powerful accessories. The plan at the start of the battle is to simply just farm SP and overdrive gauge. Just hit the enemy with normal attacks and make sure you stay alive. Right about now I have enough SP to give out buffs to my main damage dealer. In this case I'm going to be using Yuna. So I'm going to apply this specific buff to her. This skill will greatly increase the attack power and the hit amount. The hit amount will also be used on normal attacks, so I keep her in the back line for now, because I want to stack more buffs on top of it. Here apply the same move again, as they can stack twice. Also make sure to keep your team alive with your healer. Now I have enough SP to hit the enemy with my most powerful move on Kozue, which will apply the fragile debuff. Here I'll apply a buff that will give charge to the whole team. Now I hit overdrive to let the fragile debuff last another turn and get a 10% damage boost. Because I hit overdrive, now I have 5 extra SP. I will have enough to use the move Grave Mist, which lowers the enemy's thunder defense. And now with everything stacked on top of each other, they're going to be using their ultimate moves. I let Yuna attack first because her move does a lot of different hits, so a lot of damage won't be lost on the final hit of the break. And all other hits will greatly increase the devastation rate. It will be useful for Ichigo's move, which does extra damage to the HP. As you can see, the enemy took a huge amount of damage, and unfortunately it survived. But that's no issue, we can just simply repeat the process. This time, however, I'm gonna buff Ichigo and use her as my main damage dealer, while I use Yuna to increase the devastation rate. Now that I have enough SP and overdrive, I simply do the same thing again. Apply the buffs and debuffs, hit overdrive, and use your most powerful attacks. And there we go. As you can see at the end, you get the score for difficulty, the amount of turns, not having any shields broken on your team, and for the highest amount of damage in a single turn. This is a great reason why you want to have a healer and get to stack buffs and debuffs to do a great amount of damage, because that all has impact on your score as well. That is it for my Heavenburn's Red Season 1 guide, and I really hope this guide will help you get higher scores. If you want to get into more specific information about damage calculation and other in-game mechanics, and specific meta strategies, I highly recommend checking out the Tojo files. It goes a lot more in-depth than I talked about here. And also the Seraph database, which by far is the largest resource on Heavenburn's Red out there. On there you can find all the info on specific memoria, skills, and so much more. I highly recommend checking it out. Both will be linked in the description. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.